Have you been?
It was kind of a weird last month, but I'm feeling much better now. So
Oh, good. Yeah, no, I agree. It was like kind of like a weird month, you know?
yeah, it was
Super
like
weird.
Leo season was not typical Leo season, but
No, no. Yeah,
I'm
I
loving the
agree.
Virgo energy. I'm like, this
Yeah.
feels a lot better.
No, I started feeling better like I don't know, like a couple weeks ago or something, but yeah, I felt like something was weird, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad. I'm glad that we're on the same page
Yeah.
because it was just
No,
like,
super
whoa.
weird.
Your readings have been on fire though. They've been great.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, I've been trying.
You've been doing a lot, man. You're doing a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah, I just, I don't know. I think it's all my Capricorn or something. I just I like to work. So,
I
I
know.
mean, I feel like you do a lot too though. So it's not in.
Of course. Yeah. Honestly, I don't know what else to do. This is the time more than ever to do it.
Yeah, that's what I like. That's why I started this podcast because I'm like, I want to talk to people just about who are like doing their own thing, who want to start their own thing, and I'm like, if there's ever a time for like people to do what, whatever it is that they're thinking about doing, it's like right now, you know.
Yeah.
So I wanted to have you on because I've been watching you since I don't know, like 2012, something like that. I feel like we're both wearing V-necks, and back in 2012 you were in your V-neck stage, right? The black V-neck.
Yeah.
I'm in I haven't left it yet. I feel like, but yeah, I wanted to have you on because I mean you were one of the people that inspired me to get started. Started my channel, and then I also, the other thing that I really love about you is you just are always like coming up with new shows, new ideas, new things to do. So, I feel like you give permission to people to just try new stuff. So, why don't you introduce yourself for people who don't know who you are?
Oh, well, thanks, Chris. I'm David Palmer. I go by the Leo King. I'm an astrologer and tarot reader and been doing this a long time, and that's me.
Perfect. How long have you been doing astrology? Because I feel like I've never seen anyone who just gets it, like you do. It's almost like there's like a computer in your brain where you are. I've seen you do things in astrology where you just understand where everything is, and I feel like this would take me forever to figure out how to do that.
Well, I mean, I really got into it when I was young. Like, my mom had that book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From
Mm.
Venus. And I remember being curious in grade school, being like, what's that? And the whole idea of like people, especially a man being related to Mars and a woman being related to Venus, like kind of blew my mind. And then my grandfather on my dad's side, he was a CPA, but he also was like a mathematician and a computer
Mm.
genius. He helped build some of the first computers like in the world in the 60s and 70s. So he would be on a scientific calculator, which back then was the price of what a computer would be today. And I would sit and watch him crunch numbers and create his own programs, but he was mainly about astronomy. So I learned about astronomy young. He had a laser disc and would have all the Scientific Americas, National Geographics, and then he'd give me the one that he just had, and then I'd give it back to him. He'd give me a new one, and he kept them all. And so he was showing me the planets, showing me them in a telescope. So I understood the astronomy before the astrology, but I had that spiritual connection kind of building in the background until after high school. I really started, being a raver, um, like jumping the fence and leaving the normal world, I guess you could say. And so,
Yeah.
to answer your calculation question, I don't like to think I have a computer in my brain because of like the weirdness out there in the world. I feel like it's a spiritual
Yeah. Right.
iCloud where it's
Mm.
like I'm
Okay.
able to store all that info, and it's only in the moment when I'm accessing it. It's not like I'm driving my car or having conversations with people and like running that stuff. It just happens to be like, oh, in the moment, and then it just shows up.
Yeah, it just kind of like pops in for you.
Yeah. Or the best
Yeah,
way to put it
it's
is astrology is so massive, or math can be so massive. It's only what
mm,
needs to be in the moment, if that makes sense. Like when I look at
yeah.
somebody's chart, it's like, this is what's calling to me. There's a lot of aspects happening to that planet. And then I build from there. I think people can try and take astrology and do the macro to try and understand the whole universe in 1 millisecond is impossible. So it's like staying with the simple steps and building the story out of what's going on. It's like in tarot, it's like if you try and read like 10 cards all at once, right? You start with the first one and you kind of build the story, right? It's very similar.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, 'cause if you look at it just like pieces like that, I guess it could make it a little bit less complex. I think learning the whole system and everything like that. But so what made you start on YouTube in the first place? Like 10 years
Well,
ago.
I used to work with Christopher Witecki, and he had the first astrology channel in 2006. And so I joined
Wow.
Soul Garden, and then him and I started we started two shows that he helped produce. One was Astro Mingle, where I did my DJing and mixing it with astrology in October 2009. And then we did a show called Astro Gossip, where him and I together, halfway through the live show, we were live streaming in 2009. And we would
Wow.
do this, take the stories of the week of celebrity stories or whatever was more, pop culture stories or whatever was on CNN back then, and give the astrology of it. And that's when it was like, okay, by 2012, I was like doing blogs about the 2012 galactic shift with the Mayan calendar. And I'm like, I need to do this every day and get the message out. So I just started doing a video every day, and I never stopped for over 10 years. And then it turned into a million different things. But I mean, I
Yeah.
started with a laptop, like an old
Yeah.
PC, and I would just go outside because the light's better. So at least it looked better, and it had like a 720p camera on it. So at least it looked like it was a camera, but really it was like, run with what you got. I didn't have the money to have a camera then or anything like that.
Yeah, and it's even like back then you were interviewing people before anyone else was interviewing people, I think, in the spiritual community. And you were kind of doing like a podcast at the time as well, like which is pretty crazy. Ahead of your time is where I'm going with this, for sure. With that channel.
Well,
But
I think that's from I come from television. So before YouTube, I was on reality shows from 2006 to 2010. And so I was all about learning through production and television and how fast TV in Los Angeles is produced in Hollywood, about people wanting to come together and like, hey, let's just get the cameras, get the concept together and throw that together and get the reel out and try and sell it to a network. So that idea of trying things or being ahead of the curve, I was like, why don't I do this with YouTube? Nobody's doing that, especially with spirituality. It was like, it was like, especially being in reality TV, you're thrown with 8 cameras following you around for 5 weeks in Las Vegas, and you have to show up and be part of the conversation, or or they won't air you. It was one of those things of taking the television and so the quality too, and the intros that I do, it's a TV quality, because we're all, I hate to say it, but hypnotic through the television, through all of our lives, of like whether it was the news or whether it was having an intro, where YouTubers tend to just like, hey, da 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 da, right? Like that's why there's always a formal intro. There's all the stuff I do is television quality to make people go, oh, wow, look at this, opposed to it feeling like it's very YouTube-y.
Yeah. And I think, so as far as like a learning curve is, you didn't just obviously jump from the laptop to the kind of TV level studio that you have now. And, I think some people see that and they feel intimidated. Even me, like I have a crazy setup here now. But,
Yeah,
I
you
think
do. You have an
that
awesome one.
yeah, it's crazy. But it's one of those things where I think, some people get intimidated, but I'm like, you could just start with a laptop and, be on your porch and you're going to do perfectly fine, especially, nowadays.
Yeah, I think that's where it's like, it's about the message. It's about the mission of helping others, and especially collectively, whether it's through the sun signs and helping them, or whether it's through just like helping people see that there's a great, beautiful life to be had, and whatever divination tool we're using, I mean, you have to start somewhere. And so for me, it was a laptop, and then I started selling my one-on-one readings, and for years I did 5 readings a day, a video every day, and I saved the money up to be able to buy a camera, then to get a 1-bedroom apartment, to have a green screen, and I bought like a DSLR when those just came out, and I did that for years, but I just kept saving the money, and then taking the gigs that people would find me on the internet, and then it's just 1 year at a time, 1 week at a time. And if you never stop, it'll turn into your wildest dreams.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny they say that because I have a random side note question for you. Well, it kind of has to go with that. I think that, I noticed, a lot of YouTubers, people who talk about YouTube and everything, they're like, oh, camera doesn't matter and all this other stuff. But I noticed, like, when I kind of stretched a little bit and bought a more expensive camera, it's like my numbers started to go up. Not that the numbers matter or anything, but it's kind of like the little stretches, as you're building it. Those are the moments where I've noticed, like, the most growth. And, is it the same for you?
Yeah, I always say that if I'm scared about the payment, that's a good thing.
Mm.
And that when I take it on, the universe will provide what's necessary if it's in alignment with doing the spiritual work. So I feel like those moments where we expand and it's like, gosh, like this cinema camera is $30,000.
Yeah.
All right, let's do it.
Let's
You
go.
know what I mean? Like I kind of live on that edge a little bit with it because it's more like that's what I want to do is create, right? Or that's what I want to get the message out to where it's more impactful. And I do agree with the notion of, it's a better quality, it's going to come off better. But if you can't do that at the moment, there's nothing blocking you from starting with anything. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, today's cell phones are better than the webcams we were using 10 years ago,
Yeah, definitely.
So
Absolutely.
today, really, it's easier than ever. You can do in 4K Dolby Vision on your iPhone today.
Yeah.
Just turn it around the other way, not looking at yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. It's pretty crazy. Yeah, I recently learned about having. I think they call it like having a big hairy ass goal or something like that. AG, and like I said, someone told me that after I was talking about the camera the other day, and it's so true. It's like one of the few things that has, I think, helped me, grow the most is those stretches for sure. And I've definitely noticed it with you as well. Having like a full blown studio that you have and everything like that. Back to astrology. The other thing that I find the most interesting, the other thing I want to get inside your brain about is history, because I feel like you are you a big history buff? You have a big
huge
history for the most part.
Big time. Like,
yeah, because no one else connects the two things.
Well, I wouldn't say nobody, but that's as astrologers where we have to go if we look at the patterns of a transit to go, what happened the last time Uranus was in Taurus at this degree? We'll use that example for today. It's at 18 degrees retrograde in Taurus. The last time it was here was at the end of 1938. And when you look at 1938, that's right where World War II was about to break out. And we started to see food shortages. We started to see people start tripping out about these things where the economies were all weird. We started to see these weird skirmishes between countries and people start, right? So it's like, oh, okay. Right. And then you go back prior and it's like, oh, okay. What happened on the last one prior? Oh, that was right when the Civil War was about to break out. And there was segregation and there was, really intense issues in the Supreme Court, especially with the Dred Scott case. Neptune was also in Pisces at the same degree. So you see Neptune and Pisces and Uranus and Taurus in a lot of the cycles lately. And we're in that now. And then you start looking at the landscape and you're like, it's like this is happening, but just with today's issues, right? So that's why as an astrologer to make predictions, it's actually a lot more simple than people think, but you have to use the history, and it's not Wikipedia based. Like I actually buy the books that are 400 years old because there's no tainting of it, right? Like there's the experience of an individual that had it, and it was already so rare to be able to get that published back in the day. And so I buy rare books, and that's where I get a lot of my like validation, and even more than validation, but just like stuff that I never would have seen on Wikipedia or stuff I would have seen on the internet, or why I work with Dr. Ann Wolke on High Vibe, where she's a history professor. So at Cal Poly Pomona. So I'm willing to like let go of like my astrologer and be like, is this correct with the history at this time period? Like what else was going on? So I can actually get validation from a history professor and has a doctorate in history to where it's like, okay, I've got validation there too.
Yeah, and I think it's more accurate as well. You can see, so many things that just repeating themselves maybe in a different way, and even if it's in a slightly different way, or there's other transits going on and even if it's like pretty much the same, it's a little bit different but the same, and that's kind of what always interests me. And do you think, like, for my own morbid curiosity as well, do you think that it's more like these more major transits kind of affect these historical events, or is it, maybe like the minor stuff doesn't so much, change things?
Well, all really time is cycles that come to major compression points and then release points. So the events are happening, but if you look at, let's say, 5 years prior, you can see the way that the planets, the eclipse cycles and so forth, when we're in the moment, we're kind of like, oh, okay, it's chill right now. But like, you can start to see little things that are happening in reality that are being placed to where then the big domino event happens, where they're all stacked up like V is for Vendetta. And it's like, here we go, boom, and like, that's like in time, like there's these compression points where everything starts coming together. And Terrence McKenna did a lot of work with that with Time Wave Zero in the 80s, where he was actually using history and then looking at the vibration and the understanding of the mathematics. And he showed that we reached the major most compression point in 2012. Of course, he died before 2012. So, I felt like I've taken a lot of the understandings from that work alone with astrology and looking at these massive compression zones, looking at when are the most rarest aspects happening of when planets are coming together. And the biggest moments happen on the rarest alignments. And we just had that in 2020. So it's like, it's 100% connected, if that makes sense. And when you see, especially whether it's NASA today or whether now you can go to SpaceX, right? There's so much, whether it's the James Webb telescope, there's so much trying to understand the math because they actually got the math wrong. That's why the James Webb telescope uses infrared light, because they started realizing that their math was off. So there's definitely like, the one place that's been around for thousands of years is just looking at the cycles and understanding our universe from a much more simple place than, getting too far away or getting too locked into just one singular place in the universe, opposed to how do we connect everywhere in the universe.
Yeah, Time Wave Zero is interesting. There are a couple of guys, I don't remember the name, of course, or anything, but they created like a software. I think it was based off the same thing where you put in dates and it kind of shows you, I'm assuming it uses astrology, but it shows you like peak points and things like that. And, of course, like I said, it doesn't matter because I can't remember the name of it. But, I've always been interested in that. The other thing is, about the fourth turning.
Yeah.
And so, like, do you think that this ties into, what we're experiencing right now, or no?
I mean, if I were to look back in history, and this is what's crazy, is like in 1284, we had the same alignment of Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter and Capricorn that we did in 2020. And that was when Dante created the understanding of Inferno, Purgatory, and Paradiso. And so when it's like the fourth turning, whatever this is that we're creating right now as a society and, in our culture, which is actually more biological and spiritually like aligned than people realize. Like, this is really a turning of the ages at the same time when you think of the ages changing between Aquarius and Pisces, and we're in that cuspy moment in between. So we're at kind of, I would say, like the most oddest time to be alive, because you're getting all the cycles landing on top of each other, whether they're galactically or whether they're planetary. And then you're seeing the sun react in its actual flaring, and you're also seeing all the planets react. So you're seeing like this moment, and then you're seeing the people, of course, here on Earth react, right? That I think it's even larger than an understanding that we could fully get from, I guess, like what is this moment in time? It's beyond our comprehension at this moment. It's really how we're gonna all take this energy and use it. That's why I think it's such an important time for people to really like step into their greatness and step into a way of how can we all contribute and find ways to come together to help each other understand how to get through this world better, and also not fall into a lot of the programming that we see in the media today and so forth. Like, it doesn't matter what side you're on. It's just like the idea of how life should be lived. I mean, whether it's tarot, whether it's astrology, like it's all connected to a much more humanistic and a much more beautiful way that life maybe isn't as crazy as we think it is. And a lot of it is subjected onto us, and we either take it in or not. I'm a big Matrix person, and you know, the idea of like, you know, it's almost like the false dream reality, right? Like that's created in our minds, that is kind of subjected to our minds through a lot of this stuff. And I think astrology and tools like astrology or tarot help us crack those and get back to the human. Especially tarot gives us a human understanding of divination.
Right.
And that's really the best part about tarot, is it actually allows us to see like actual ways of how our human understandings are, and they keep it back in the way that, you know, makes sense to our life and so forth. Whereas like we're kind of like, I don't know, kind of taking concepts and so forth that wouldn't even make sense in a tarot card today. And that's how I'm like, yeah, that's not in alignment.
Yeah, it's kind of like, you know, speaking of that, it reminds me of like, I think of right now, it's like, are we in a dream or a nightmare? You know, I think about the Matrix thing all the time.
Right.
And I'm like, can we, you know, I think of the fourth, you know, I heard someone worried about the fourth turning. That's why I asked you the other day. Someone left me a comment about the fourth turning, and I was like, yeah, well, are we really like stuck in these cycles, or, you know, can we turn it into not a nightmare? Can we turn it into like a good dream? Can we turn it into something better? Like, you know, how much control do we have over it, right?
Yeah, like in the Matrix, and the second one, that's where Neo meets with the architect, and he goes, this is, you know, your 6 times prior you've been here before, and this is always what happens. And it shows his reactions, right? His anger, and you have a choice at this moment. He's like, you could either go back, you're going to start a new civilization, and we let you be with some of the humans and we start this whole thing over again, or you could risk it all and go save Trinity, right? And he chooses love, and he does the 7th time, which is ironic, was 7th number or chariot, right? He chariots it. He's like, no, I'm going this way. I'm going for her. I'm not going to do those old cycles in the city of the past. And he goes that way, and that changes the whole script. So I do believe 100% that beyond a fourth turning, beyond a revelation, beyond all these things, is how we're going to do this again, because we all could have been here before. That's the weirdest part. And are we going to take a different course at this moment? That's really what the true free will choice is that we're going to still be in the cycle, but it's how we're going to ride the cycle, opposed to continue to ride the same wheel of fortune maybe and just keep watching the up and downs. Like I feel like there's a more of a world card moment here, you know?
Yeah, it's like, you know, I see it kind of like, are people going to be brave and maybe do something where they, you know, I was talking about this today with the 4 Pentacles too. I was like, where you maybe are moving forward, you don't have any footing. Maybe you feel a little bit off balance. You're moving forward into something that does require bravery, like, you know, changing your life, or starting a business, or, you know, writing a book, doing something that you've never done before, or, you know, have you?
Yeah, because that's the way to really, you know, change the energy around, right? I mean, I feel like if you feel the world today, like there's a numbness about things. And I think, you know, like you and I had talked earlier, like it was just like, man, you're putting out so much. You're like, yeah, you're putting out so much. And it's like, well, I don't know what else I'd be doing, but it brings a feeling of aliveness, right? But there's also more out there that it's like, I think we have to get out of this place where I think technology is taking us too far away from our humanistic elements. And that's kind of what the astrology is saying too, right? Like we have to have the connection too of people, and not being afraid of emotion, you know? Like I think that's a huge part of this, is emotions are part of our life and they embody us into this reality. And I feel like people are trying to escape the reality too much, where I do believe at the same time we can access other realms, but I feel like the more grounded you are here and content with how you are here, the farther you'll go into those higher realms too.
Yeah, I wonder, you know, with Aquarius, you know, entering into the age of Aquarius, like I see it, like, is it the metaverse, right? Technology, or is it everyone's supposed to be their own little star, you know, as I like to say, shining in inspiring other people? You know, it's kind of like we have 2 choices: become more sterile, or, I don't know, try to do something, right?
I mean, if you think of the Matrix, right, it's almost like there was 2 different versions of that. There were people plugged into pods, which would be like a VR set, living in a reality that they thought was real. And then there were people in Zion. So it almost is like we could inverse that to the opposite. There might be some people that do want to go live in VR world forever. Or is there a way for us to mix both together? Because I don't like to look at anything as all evil, right? Like, I feel like that's a bad place to be, is when you look at everything as that's bad, I won't ever do it, or da da da. Because I love VR, and like, in 2017, I did the first astrology VR horoscope live.
Oh wow. Nice.
And worked with you know, one of the first VR companies that created an astrology VR program, and it was awesome. And I feel like, you know, there's so many great ways to teach with VR. So I think the technology is, of course, a big part of it, but I also, you know, as an astrologer, predict that the Jetsons' life is not coming, that's the shock. Whatever we think is in Aquarius, right? Whatever we think it's going to be is usually the opposite. Uranus always shocks us, right? And if you look at technology today, we've kind of reached this weird kind of place where it hasn't advanced too much. It might seem like it has, but really we haven't seen. The iPhone's like the greatest leap that there was, a touch phone iPhone, and that you could run your whole life kind of on that. And VR's kind of been the next thing, but that's been around since 2016. And even in the 90s, they had VR experiments. So where is it all really going? I mean, it's like, you know, like maybe humanity is not as, you know, crazy technological as we might think we are, you know, like that's maybe the whole part of Aquarius, is to get us back to the humanity part, that the technology kind of reaches its peak, kind of like a stock market, right? Like, in how you'll see peaks in the cycle, and then there'll be like I feel like we are kind of in a bear market with technology at the moment. Yeah.
It's like people are waiting for like a moon landing or something, you know, something more mind-blowing.
Right, but like, I mean, if you know, I know there's people who don't believe in that and people who do, but it's like, that already has happened. Like, we already saw that. There's plenty of people who went, and there's plenty of footage, and there's plenty of, right? So it's like, the big, I think, explosion people are looking for is like the connection back to people and what we could do together. And maybe it doesn't have to be so technological. Maybe it could be so many other ways of like coming together and like talking about the things that we all enjoy, and feeling like we're not alone in this world, and coming up with some awesome ways of events. And, you know, Aquarius is really like much more, you know, social. And, you know, of course we see that through social media, but, you know, there's some really hard aspects to the Aquarius stuff. Pluto coming into Aquarius is always a time where the way you think society is going to be, it all inverts. And Pluto now is below the declination, so it's in the underworld now. For us to live through a life where, just if you think of Pluto in Cancer during the Depression, and now we're in Capricorn about to end, Pluto is 248 years around the sun. We went through the fastest part. So now it's going where it extends out for longer periods of time through the signs. For us to have a Pluto square around 39 and 40 years old, you have to remember people who were born in, like, let's say the inverse, that would be the opposite, like born with Pluto in Aries and born with Pluto in Pisces and all those things. They don't get their Pluto squares till they're in their 60s or in their late 70s. So we're a different, unique generation, just as they were during the Revolutionary War and all the founding fathers. They had their Pluto squares young, like us. And so there's like a different evolution of the people and the generations that we're at now than there are the ones that, you know, are going to come over the next 20 years. They're going to be a little bit slower and take a while, you know. So we're kind of the unique, you know, Gen X, you know, Gen Y, and then millennials. Like, you know, it's different.
It's probably a good thing that they're slower. You know, it's probably a good thing that things like
correct, because we're kind of the end of the fast, right? Like, I mean, if you think of how fast society's gone, and we've reached a place where it's like we kind of do need to slow it down a little bit and take in the energy of the flowers. We need to Six of Cups it a little bit, you know?
Yeah, be grateful for some of the stuff that we do have, probably.
And maybe not be so Four of Pentacles, like you said, too much, right? Like,
much,
we can't let anything in because it's just, it has to be this one way, you know? That card always reminds me of like just straining on, like, you know, like,
oh my God, yeah. That it kind of does look like he's like sitting on the toilet, doesn't it? It's like,
yeah, and he's just holding on, like, I can't let go. Like, it's just like, wow, like, it's okay, you could let it go, you know, and let things in, you know. But there's some things in life that we do have to hold with high value. Like, for me, when it comes to spirituality, like, I'll hold that the integrity to it, or the, you know, the way to show up to it with the highest regard. That's not something I'll let go, but I don't feel like I'm straining that. You know what I mean? I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think it's hard to strain that. And, I think going the other way is more of a strain, trying to, force things in your life to work for certain reasons, like maybe material reasons. Like I always say, I love material things
Yeah.
personally. I consider myself maybe more 3D than, necessarily spiritual sometimes. But, it's like when I try to do those things, they never work. But if I try to do things for, good reasons, not only does it feel better, but it goes smoother, like for more spiritual reasons.
And I think honestly, that's all really spirituality is. It's more simpler. I think people have taken it really too far
Mm,
and getting lost into kind of the woo woo, but like, you know, like there's a way, that's all really it is. If you're really connected in a good way and you have good intentions, and, you know, like people are taking some of this stuff all too far in every department, right, in life.
right, right.
And I think that the astrology is telling us to kind of curb taking things too far, and come back to kind of like, you know, things that work in life.
Mm,
I feel like it's causing a lot of frustration in people's lives because we've kind of running the mind too much, right? Like trying to
mm,
figure out so many things,
everything.
and that
Yeah.
the mind wasn't made to figure out those crazy problems 24/7. And that's why it's like bringing things back to simple things, or one thing at a time, or things that really matter that make us feel better, is really where to start at.
Yeah, I think that's like a good way out. If people are looking for a way almost, not out of the energy, but to work with the energy is just kind of breaking things down and making it just easier, not trying to overthink everything.
I know. It's not easy though. You're
No, it's
not you're
not.
not alone out there, you know. Be
No,
join the club.
definitely not.
But I think
Yeah.
that's where we can come together in the Aquarius energy, is like when we all communicate, you know, what we're going through and so forth, which could be vulnerable, but it's the community that could, you know, have our backs and be like, oh wow, I'm not alone in this, and somebody has a solution for me. That's really why we're here. We all have solutions for each other, you know.
Mm.
And I think that's going to be the big, you know, blow everybody's wanting to have, like the big explosion that people think is like, hey, actually the whole time, like you had an answer and I had an answer for you, and we all found ways to come together. And that's some of the best feelings in the electricity that feels, that connects us all and binds us all together.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. It's like everybody has something that can, help everyone else out, and maybe everybody is again being pushed to like sides or being pushed to be more alone and things like that. But I kind of see it coming back together, hopefully, where people realize that.
I mean, that's what Aquarius is like. Like if the lights go out,
Yeah,
you
no, no,
appreciate the lights a lot more. So it's
yeah,
like we've kind of gone through that. And there's that energy that's going to be plugging back in, and that feeling of like, oh gosh, finally the lights are back
mm,
on, and finally I can use my, you know, electricity for anything I want again. And there's that like, feeling, you know. And I think that's going to be the feeling of when people start connecting more and start realizing that maybe you're not supposed to hold so much energy, and like there's others in this world that are here to help you, you know, remove that by just having to talk or having a, you know, like, but vulnerability you wouldn't think goes with Aquarius, but it's the vulnerability to be social. You see a lot of social anxiety in the world today.
mm,
You see a lot of, and that's all Aquarian, you know, stuff, because we can isolate too much and become too cold, right? Where that's the whole like shadow side, right? Is where we forget our humanity or become transhumanistic, like with technology, like we're seeing and so forth, right? It's like this is where it's like remembering that we're humanity, and that's why it's a water bear. He's out there pouring water for other people. It's not like he's pouring the water for himself, you know.
yeah,
That's what's kind of interesting, is like he's already poured himself water, and now he's going to give it to others. But you know, when he's pouring the water, it's not like I need more. It's like, well, the next person needs some too, so I've given you water, you know. And then keep going forward. That's why it's always about moving forward. You know, you can't keep going backwards with Aquarius. And
mm,
we're at this kind of end point here, but also a beginning point with Aquarius, with Pluto about to enter in March of 2023, that it, you know, is the same transits that changed the world the last time, literally created America, or all these big things are happening right now.
yeah. And it's like so we're gonna stay stuck in this shadow. Do you think, or do you think we're kind of on our way out. You know, I kind of see some of the things that are happening as maybe, I don't know if I would call it exposure, but you know, things being revealed, and I see like more of that in the future. But I don't know. It's like, are we gonna be in the shadow for longer, or are we coming out into the light? Do you think?
I mean, I think that the shadow like work really is like learning to find ways to come together with people more. But the
Hmm.
exposure is, I think, the hugest part, that so many people are seeing it. But I think that with Aquarius, you always get thrown a massive curveball. Like the
Mm.
fact that they even started to expose UFOs, there's more to that. And when you start to see the weird things that have gone on in the last couple of years, what a great way to start blaming the atrocities that have happened on people that maybe have. I mean, look how many world leaders have stepped down in the last couple of
Yeah.
months, or people changing their position out of nowhere, that you're like,
Hmm.
why were you acting this way? And now and it's almost like, did the UFO thing get set up to be like, it was really the aliens that were doing it, right?
Yeah.
To kind of push off them. And that's why I
Right.
think we're going to have to be careful, because there's going to be a lot of like crazy, wild kind of things that are going to feel like that never could happen. But it's about learning in Aquarius and being like, oh wait, I'm smarter than this. I can put together, like, that's off on the equation. What's not a common denominator here? You know, like, it's where they tried to change the common denominator. And when you ever try to do long division and you don't have denominators, I mean, it starts to feel like it's really off in alignment, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, and I think people, it's like those things are harder and harder to ignore. You know, it kind of reminds me of like how they try to ban people on social media, which I talk about all the time, because it's like, you know, they just bring more attention to these things. It doesn't,
Yes.
you know, these things don't just disappear.
No, and I think that you can't be afraid of it either, right?
Mm.
It's like, they've banned me in other weird ways, but I just like kind of like put it up, and I was like, well, okay, whatever. I'm not fully banned or whatever, and then I
Yeah.
just keep just being who I am, and then it always ends up going away somehow.
Hmm.
I don't know, it's funny because they changed the guidelines so
Mm.
much right now. Like, the world changes every day. And
Right.
so if you get caught up in we have to be adaptable, but I think at the same time, like, not losing it over that it's changing so much. Like,
Mm.
I think that it's like kind of cool.
Yeah, it like makes it way more exciting. You know, you never know what you're gonna get, right? So,
Right.
yeah,
I mean,
makes it.
and that's how I think why I love astrology or why I love tarot is like,
Mm.
it's like living. You never know what's going to happen when you meet somebody new and you look at their chart, or when you do a reading for somebody with tarot too. It's like, wow, look at this. Like, it's always a shocking moment every time, I feel like. So I feel like people who really follow these kind of places really, I think, during this time have kind of thrived more and seen more that there's more validation to it than less, if that makes
Mm.
sense.
Yeah, I think that that's only going to probably grow more and more, like more and more people getting, you know, kind of confirmation from it, but also just feeling like it's validated. I mean, even just so many people, I feel like that leave comments sometimes. I'm like, they're like, oh, you know, my family doesn't believe in this. I'm religious, but I love this, you know, and stuff like that. Those are the things where I'm like, yeah, you know, it's starting to kind of creep out, I wonder, or something, or become more, I don't know, I wouldn't call it mainstream, but something.
I mean, if we look at history, I mean, it was how we guided our lives
Yeah,
for a long time. And then when we
right.
strayed from it, and especially Rome, was when it went down. So it's
Right,
like one of
right.
those things to where, I wouldn't be surprised in an age of Aquarius of seeing the implementation of it more. But then there comes a point to where then people
Mm.
get bored with it and then they want to try something different, which,
Mhm.
like, that's going to be the whole Aquarian eight. Like, the Matrix really is like the movie series that I feel like is the most relevant to the astrology and to everything to pay attention to, of where we could end up. And I think that the more that,
Right.
we become as people and we understand these things, and, I think that there are limitations to technology that have to be kind of discussed in the future, right? Like,
Mm.
it's almost like there's been kind of like a over, you know,
Mhm.
experimental aspect to it lately, where we have to think about every human being on the planet, and there has to be some sort of limits on everything, right? I feel. And
Mhm.
that's where I think the hard part of the technology part's going. Or do we even have enough resources for the amount of batteries they're wanting to make now and all these kind of things, right? Like we have to think about, like, I know people think of it as environmental, but I think of it as logistical. Like, like the earth only has so much of these different, irons or these different precious metals or so forth. And so, that's also why I think they're looking so desperately up for other planets, or what's on Mars so much, or what's on the moon so much, to try and excavate from that. And I think that's going to be the mind blow, is when you start seeing over the next decade, like them going, we need to get this from over there, we need to get this from over here. Or why they're even looking at different. There was that movie, I forgot the name of it, but yeah, where they were like, oh yeah, the asteroid's coming, but we're not going to deflect it. We're going to take all the stuff off of it and make billions off it. It's like, that's kind of like where I think a lot of these places are looking more at, because a lot of the things we're seeing today don't make sense. Like, how are we going to do this? There's obviously something else going on that's not being exposed yet,
Yeah. Oh yeah, I feel the same way. It's kind of, yeah, it's interesting to me to think about that. I could think about that for forever, but it's like they're trying to rush to the finish line without like having everything lined up first. I mean, I feel that energy all the time of this, like trying to rush to something, and it's like, well, do we have to rush? Necessarily. I'm not saying the environment isn't important and things like that, but it's like, we have to make sure that we can get there.
Yeah.
Or we're not gonna have anything.
Right. I mean, if you're going to move, it's like, okay, like I got to pack the stuff up, and then I got to get, a truck and the moving company and people to help and pack things up and then move it. But it's almost, they're just like trying to like throw the couch like to the next house and hope it makes it there, and other cars hit it until it flips in the house or something. Like they're kind of, it reminds me of 10 of Wands too. It's just like, wow, you're going to do all that at once? Like that's going to be a really hard pull and a lot of heavy weight. And, I think that's where, it's just like, well, maybe there's something else going on that's behind it all that makes it look like that, but really we're not seeing the other part. And that's kind of the weird part of the end of Pluto and Capricorn is, a lot of any end of a transit of Pluto is exposure. And then it also takes a figure. So if you take 2008, right, you saw like the energy of like Bush, like, we need him gone, right? Like he's done. And then it's like Obama was oh my gosh, he's going to save the world. Every Pluto, if you follow it, the end of the transit brings a person that is a heretic, and then somebody else who's a martyr, So it's kind of interesting. These are the signals we're seeing in the universe right now. And you can tell that Pluto's like, okay, I'm about to show you guys all like what's all going on. Right. Like we found out about the Iraq war, and that Dick Cheney was doing a lot of this stuff, and and there was exposure, but it was Sagittarius. It's a little bit more lighter. Capricorn's heavier in the systems and what's really not going on, and financial too, because Pluto's a financial planet, rules Scorpio. And then when you mix that with the government, that's where our financial systems are all feeding through. So, these are really intense times where people, I think, don't need to be scared, but just be aware and find cool people that you can like have these cool random talks with, and know everything's going to be all right, and realize that whatever changes happen, we'll find a way, opposed to freaking out and being, it has to still stay the same way. If you look at evolution, I'm sorry, we were riding horses 100 years ago. It wasn't like everybody had a car in 1922.
Yep.
So, I mean, people were still riding horses. So, like we're not, we'll find a way. I just think that people right now, and I think what your channel does so great is you're able to help people see the good stuff in life to find, and also to be aware of like where maybe, hey, you might be going through this, but hey, look at this is where it's leading. You always do such a great job of leading people to where, the great things in life that there are for them, and really giving them the understanding of it's all right. And like, look at these great things that look like they're coming possible for you.
Yeah, thank you. I kind of look at it as, I wonder if they're, I call them third place solutions, where, maybe this time we're entering into, there will be, some people think like electric cars, and other people are like gas cars, but what if there's some sort of like something better? We could be flying around in UFOs or something, if someone invents it, right? So
or fusion energy or something.
Or something else, So it's like, yeah, I think we're in a time of where we just need better solutions, better ideas, not necessarily, kind of like what we have, right?
Well, and if you look at the frustration of the world today, it's then what sometimes creates somebody to finally go do that, right? Like there may be some inventor who's sitting in his house and he's had these designs and he got really close and then he gave up on it 10 years ago. And now after this, he's like, oh, God, you know what? I'm going to get back on that chalkboard right now. And I'm going to get there and start to do it. But even with Uranus and Taurus, I mean, it was, Werner von Braun, and he was a Nazi back in the day. And then we took him over here and took all their old plans to go to space, to create the atomic bomb, to do all that. And that's what's kind of crazy, but that's Uranus Taurus, that there's more coming here that we don't realize that are in plans that are going to be like, it was the V2 rockets, right? That Germany was doing during this Mars retrograde that's coming this year. Oh, that's really? When he started that project in 1943 into 44, when he was still on the German side. So, and it was those rockets that he had crazy ideas of going to space with, also the idea of like how to propel and get certain rockets that would have like, all those kind of like technological aspects we see today. It was also at the same time when, Hitler was like sending people down to Antarctica to see what's going on down there. So, you really start to kind of look at like how we're not being kind of told stories anymore. We're just like funneled, like almost like, here's the stories, right? But it's like, what's really going on behind all the life? It's such a big world that, the idea that all that's happening in the world is through what we're told in stories in the media is crazy. There's 7 billion people here. There's 7 billion times another 100 million of, if you think of how many options we have as an individual this life, that are all happening at the same moment right now, that there's so many things happening.
Yeah.
And we only see just through the tiniest microscopic little window of it,
Yeah, I think that's everybody's homework too, is that everybody needs to think about their rocket that they're going to create here during this Mars retrograde. I like that a lot. Not literally a rocket, but, like some sort of something that could maybe speed up your life or maybe, get you where you need to go, right?
Yeah, because think of his journey, von Braun. The V2 rocket program was scary because he was actually the idea of an intercontinental like rocket missile.
Oh, right, yeah.
And so they went full with the program, but that's what the Allied troops targeted. And they had all these crazy bases and it never happened. But if you were to take von Braun's case, he was just doing that because that's what he was forced to do, right? But it's weird because he ends up on the American side and he was still working for the American government even when JFK was around. So to help with the NASA program and to help with going to NASA and to go to the moon and all this stuff. So, for him in his life, it was like, it looked like a failure, but it was anything but, and it's weird because his astrology and his story is very connected to kind of these moments right now that are happening. So it's like Elon Musk, for example, right? Like he's doing all this great stuff with SpaceX and of course, like his stuff with Tesla, but it's like, there's something else. Like you say, like the third option thing that is going to be what Aquarius is and Pluto coming in here. Like we all think it's going to be, in politics this way or that way, or we think in technology this way or that way. But like, there's this other option that's so going to be where it's all going. And that's going to be the shock that we're all looking for,
Yeah, it's kind of such a, like, I always think of, Neptune and Pisces too. I'm always like, is this like a magician where, the energy's like, hey, look over here. But then like someone like Elon Musk comes in and maybe he has like something up his sleeve and he's like, oh, actually I have this right here or something better.
Yeah, because in Pisces and Neptune being in its own sign, it's bound. There's no boundaries. Pisces is the highest of the macro, right? It's the ultraviolet light. It's the boundless of dreams, right? Dreams have no boundaries. We can go like we can't control our dreams unless you want to start going into astro travel or you want to start playing around in those kind of realms. But still, even with that, like there are just subconscious dream elements that take us. There's no boundaries. It's like, how in the heck was I flying and then I was doing this and then I was doing that in my dream? Or it reminds me of Inception. How many layers can you go down in the dream world, right? Like in the idea that the time and the space becomes longer and more infinite, the deeper you go down. So I feel like as people are in spirituality, the Neptune and Pisces thing, yeah, sure, it's got the magician element, like look here, but really this is going on. But on deeper levels, like this is actually where people are starting to be like, are we already in a matrix? Like that's a big question. Like Neptune and Pisces brings up really far out stuff. Like, and like, did V already happen? Like, you know what I mean? And we're
Yeah.
already in a more advanced version of it. And then like, we're waking up
Mhm.
to another version of it now, or, you know, there's a lot of those kind of elements. And even understanding Neptune, that it's the outpost to the sun, that it's the antenna that's allowing to know what's coming into our solar system from outside. So like we had Oumuamua in 2017, the asteroid that came for the first one that ever came in outside of our solar system, and then went by the Earth and turned around, and every 8 hours showed light. That means it had a flat surface, which means it wasn't made by God, that there was some sort of intelligence behind it. And that's why the Harvard professor came out and said, hey, this thing is alien, and it's tripped people out because it propelled away from the sun. Normally things come in around the sun, whether it's a comet or an asteroid, and it'll you know, bounce around it and then leave out. It'll use the gravity of the sun. But this thing went on its own and went, I'm turning my own direction. So, you know, these things are public, they're out in the world, and like people kind of, Neptune and Pisces can also be like, hey, I didn't see that. I don't know. Like, whoop, like, you know, like I don't want to try to understand, this is too much. I just kind of want to veg out and, you know, look at the problem with our culture today with alcohol, or look at it with like drug use, or how many fentanyl deaths or whatever, right? Like these are where people are tuning out. Like, I don't want to understand all this, right? Or there's people who are super tuned in. It's one or the other, you know?
Yeah, I wonder what that also, it's like, if it's like people have nothing to aim at. Sometimes I think with Neptune and Pisces, it's like there's no markers, where it's like normally we'd be like working towards something or doing something in life, and there's like a milestone or something. With Neptune and Pisces, it's almost like there are no milestones. There are no like markers that say, hey, you're going in the right direction, or this is exactly what you're supposed to be doing, or, you know, whatever.
Yeah, it's the flow, right? So it's like flowing down a river, right? Like we might have a marker, but you know, I didn't expect to run into that beaver's dam, but thank God the beaver was nice and left the little hole for me to kind of go, oops, whoa, and then flow that other way around it. And that's how we kind of bounce around. It's like bumper cars a little bit in Pisces to me, and Neptune and Pisces, like, you know, just kind of like bumping into things and kind of like, oh, learning from it, and just like learning to like let it roll, let it flow. But when Neptune comes into Aries, it's the markers that become kind of overly boundless, right? Like the Civil War was right when Neptune went into Aries. Abraham Lincoln became president, and then boom, right? And then the markers become, you know, okay, we got to free for slavery, right? But then it's like, oh man, look at the markers with that too. Like they become, you know, to where there's Reconstruction afterwards, and like people don't want to let go of their Southern life, right? And that's like the idea of like Gone with the Wind, right? Like they like didn't want to let go of that lifestyle. And then we saw that continue, you know, for a long time. So Neptune and Aries becomes like kind of like these markers that some people get too attached their identity to, which was the South, right? Where the North was willing to be inclusive and be like, no, this is not right. And that we're all human and we're all created equal. And we're okay with setting this marker in a new way. So whoever's going to be trying to set a marker that it has to stay a certain way and that we can't be more inclusive, and that's how you know you're on the wrong side. Like Neptune and Pisces is letting you know you're on the wrong side, or the right or wrong side spiritually, right? There's separation, yes, but there's consciousness and consciousness. Like, where is there an inclusivity? Because by the time we get to Neptune and Aries, which is coming up here in 2025, you know, it's going to get wild. I mean, I keep telling people, like, this is not going to just settle down. The energies of this 2020s are, we just entered the lobby and the movie's just starting, you know?
Yeah, I feel like maybe people are finally starting to watch the movie, though, which is you know, maybe different than what we have been experiencing for, you know, a while.
It's true. I mean, if you really think about it, like, this is a really cool movie.
It is,
but, you know, it makes every movie look boring, to be honest with you. You can't write this movie. It's too good.
Yeah. And maybe that's why movies have been so boring lately as well. You know, I wonder that. But yeah, kind of, it's like, you know, I think that also people need to realize that they have like more than enough stuff inside of them to fill probably like 100 lifetimes. So, you know, I feel we can make it more exciting, you know, if we wanted to. There's so many, you know, if we kind of just did the things that we wanted to do, you know?
Yeah, and I think when you bring up the movie thing, it's like they just keep doing, like, you know, sequels or prequels or right, like there's no more original thought or original stories, and that's why I like watching older movies, because I'm like, man, I missed the time when it was just like movies about this or movies about that. They didn't have to be such huge superhero movies and such, you know, the same thing with the guys on the corner and, oh, I'll get them and right. It's just kind of like, this is where original thought or being your original self is the best part of this movie, and how you're integrating in this movie, and that you're not trying to be a copycat, or you're not trying to be like running, you know, like maybe it's okay if you're going to change characters a little bit here or evolve your character here instead of try and be like what you know, like, well, that was a great movie and I want to be just like that movie. It's kind of like, like incorporate your own uniqueness, you know, and see what happens. Like, this is where I feel like the boundless energy is waiting for the collective to be as unique as it can be. That's also what Aquarius is. So I like your analogy earlier of the individual stars within each other, you know, like that's really where we connect together as individuals that understand who they are. And when they all come together, that's power, opposed to, you know, kind of feeling like only a couple people have the power and that they know the best way. That doesn't ever work out well.
Yeah, never.
So like, this is where we need individuality and we need freedom and we need the ability for all of us to be unique.
Yeah, I wonder, you know, it kind of reminds me of like the idea of the algorithm. Like maybe since a certain period of time, everything, you know, has been getting boring because it has to fit this certain algorithm so that like reaches numbers and all this other stuff. And, you know, I hope it just goes, like you said, more individual, more creativity, that direction.
I mean, well, think about if you took social media and you made it real life with all the people in real life, and you were in a big warehouse with like, you know, let's say 20,000 people, and you're gonna be like, oh, these verified people with all the people, they're going to be seen on the algorithm first, so they're going to be able to say what they want, and everybody else, you guys all stay over here and you're not allowed to see this, and you have something to say, oh, I don't really care, these people only. And if you were to do that in real life, people would be like, this is the most effed up crap I've ever been through in my whole life. That's how you know it's not, something's off. And that, you know, like that like if you take the inverse, right? Aquarius always says inverse it and see what happens. So, you know, I think we get lost in social media and not realize if you were to take those algorithms and you put them in a real life, we wouldn't talk like how many people are following you in this room. Like, you know, you wouldn't say that. You wouldn't be like, you'd just be like, that's kind of a little weird. Like, you know, you'd be like, I don't know, I'm friends with, I don't know, I'm cool with anybody. I'm willing to be cool with anybody in this room, right? Well, then there'd be people like, I know that person. That reminds me of high school, you know, like, yeah, that's my best friend. And that's the best, you know, like, it's like, we're seeing a hyperbolic part of it now. It's like crazy.
Yeah, I love that, what you just said about like, what is the opposite? Can, you know, what, you know, even just operating, you know, I kind of think about that sometimes, like, what is the opposite of, you know, whatever I'm doing, you know, in my day to day. Sometimes there are like a lot of answers in the opposite right now, even before I think we get into energy.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's like even, but I think that's where, you know, you're in alignment, right? Like you could throw yourself off YouTube and be in the normal world and doing this, and you would still be satisfied.
Yep.
And people would still be happy and you'd be happy. That's where you know you're in a good place. But it's when you're not, you know, like, I think that's where the mask kind of comes off, is with Pluto too at the end of Capricorn, right? Like you can't wear the mask anymore of the identity that you think that you are, right? Like, you know, like if it's not true from inside too, right? That's authenticity that Capricorn brings in, integrity. Like you can't be a different person on the outside than you're on the inside to have awards and honors that Capricorn brings, right? Like it's integrity that wins at the end of the day. So I think like throwing the opposite of like, am I that if I were to be off social media and doing this in the real world? Or if I'm in the real world, what if I brought that? There's a lot of people who have never brought it to social media. And actually, you know, I found so many people during the last 2 years of the world that, like, you know, like reviving your Coleman like lantern from the 70s. Like, and those like the channels like that were like so much more fun to watch, because I was like, wow, this is how you do it, or this is how you do that, or this is how you do that. There was people who came out and started to be like, well, I guess I'm at home, so I'm going to do this now and show what I really like. And it's like, that's the cool stuff, you know? And I think that, you know, the idea of popularity and pop culture and stuff really did come to its end, because it's not what we all are. Like, we all don't want to be supermodels. We all don't have to aim as these specific things as the goal, Capricorn, right? To feel empowered. Like our goals can be so unique and so built off integrity that, and just being our natural self, that's where we thrive. And I think that people are really, you're seeing it a lot more now. You're seeing, and that's how you know we're on the right page when we go those directions. But when I like, they just had the VMAs last night. I didn't watch it, but I just saw on the news, right? It's just like, they're still doing that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, maybe it helps, you know, teenage kids, but I feel like, you know, there's just like a lot of systems that don't really feel natural or feel like they give us goals that really feel like unique to ourselves, where it's almost like you need to be more like me, that aren't working.
I think a lot of those shows like get lower and lower ratings every single year anyway. But you know, it reminds me. I always make a joke. I'm like, if you want to start a worm farm, for example, you should start a worm farm YouTube channel too. You know, because you know people will actually watch it. I watch this guy. It reminds me. I watch this guy, Greg Ovens. He's like a survival guy, but he's just like his channel is huge because I think he's just so authentic. He is just himself, and you know, I think YouTube is just a side effect of, you know, what he's doing in life. Like someone got him to do the YouTube channel, and like I see so much of that. That's why I like encourage people. I'm like, if you want to talk about worms all day, do it, because I guarantee you millions of people will probably be into it just because you are, and you would be doing it in the real world. It's like, you know, I think that's kind of how I see this whole thing too. Is we're entering into this world where people are going to be mixing two things together, where it doesn't matter if you are in the metaverse or the real world. You can have both or one or the other, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like that's what, like you bring up him, but I feel like that's where people have to see in themselves. Just be yourself, and so much better things will happen. I mean, it's kind of crazy now, but when you brought up ratings, YouTube channels are better ratings as whole networks now.
Right. It's
in all their shows.
Yeah.
Right. So like, that's where I don't know how they're still propping it all up, if that makes sense. That nobody's really watching. No, the advertisers nobody's watching a commercial anymore and going, I want to go get that right now. Like I couldn't tell you the last time I saw a commercial where I actually was like, I'm going to go get that new, you know, Bounty, like plus, like, yeah, that's the one I want to get. Like, you know, like nobody's living in that space anymore. So it almost is kind of, I think one of the weirdest things is what is keeping the media up. That's kind of an interesting thing because it's based off advertising, and cable boxes are pretty much gone, right? People are on like YouTube TV if they do want to watch television, but like there's YouTube and more people watch that. And so it's like, it's kind of like, what's propping all that up? The government? Like, that's the big question.
I think I always look at it like billboards, you know, it's like billboards used to make sense when people drove slow, but now, you know, now since like when billboards were good, it's like the cars didn't go 100 miles an hour, you know, but it's like now I still see billboards, but can I tell you like what any billboard that I saw was like ever? Like I don't remember any billboards ever. And you know, I feel the same way about TV. It's like maybe people are still believe, because it's like legacy media or whatever, they still believe that there's some value in it, but it's like nobody watches it.
I mean, the only billboards I think that I see anymore is like if I'm driving to Vegas and it'll be like, you know, like Chevron next stop, the world's largest Chevron, because there is the world's largest or gas station in the world, you know, when you're like 30 miles outside Vegas, and it's got like 120 pumps. And it's like, come and see the world's biggest, and it's so unique and random that it's like, okay, yeah, I do want to see what it's like. Inside's as big as like a Costco. Right. So it's kind of like, oh, like, yeah, let's go through that. Like they have every kind of Slurpee you could think of, and every kind of, like, they have Krispy Kreme donuts in there. Okay, I'm going to go check that out. Like, but people are more adept to like what feels like cool and natural instead of the cool now too. Like the idea of cool is also Aquarius. So if you think about it, what used to be cool is not cool anymore. What's cool is like the stuff that you didn't think was cool in the past, right? Like now, like, right, like you bring up the survival channel, or maybe you're into camping or tents, or maybe you're into worms, like you said, right? Like those are the things that are cool now, because it's like we've been like kind of like lost and kind of force fed, like this is what's cool. And it's like, that's not what people really are.
Yeah, like I'm Aquarius rising. I'm a nerd. Like, you know, I think nerdy is a way to go. like as far as whatever you're putting out into the world too. So people are going to be totally into nerdy stuff. I totally see that.
Yeah, and I think that's where, right, the nerds always are the ones at the end of the day.
Yeah, right.
that get it all and that work out. And I think, yeah, I think that's where it's at. And I think just whether it's nerd or whether it's just being authentic, like I think if we create with the Neptune Pisces too much of the illusion of what comes from not your own original self or soul, but outside of your soul, it doesn't match. So I think there's a lot of people feeling empty out there because they're visualizing what didn't come from an original thought within themselves, an original soul feeling. And that's where Neptune and Pisces teaches you, like, hey, no, like, you know, or if it's love too, right? It's like the ideation of like what kind of partner to have or whatever, because you probably saw it on Instagram or you saw it on this, or it's like, hey, just go back to you and like what feels good for you. And if that's it, open yourself up fully with the compassion and the heart space that Pisces provides and see the boundless love that can go in that direction, you know?
Yeah, even that is like going. Love is like crazy. I just saw something about a girl who killed her boyfriend or something, and she was like some big Instagram or celebrity or something like that.
Oh,
I don't
really?
remember what she was. Yeah, she like stabbed him. And you know, it's funny that you say that, because when that happened, I was like, man, it's like this relationship stuff is going crazy. You know what I mean? It's like there are all these different things are being exposed with relationships. I've been thinking a lot about that. Like, where are relationships going? Are people, you know, I don't really necessarily see it becoming more traditional necessarily, although sometimes I think like Neptune and Pisces is like traditional belief. Like, what do you believe? Like, what traditions do you believe? And yeah, I always I wonder about that.
Well, I think that the traditional element is going to be there as long as it has a similar spiritual quality to it.
Mm.
Right? Like if like, right? Like, it's like, I mean, I know this is your podcast, but I would love to ask you a question because
Go for it.
because the tarot community has changed a lot over the years that you and I've been in it. And I've noticed with you that you've really expanded your tarot, but you've gone in your own way, where I see a lot of tarot channels being all about love and like, what are they thinking? Right? Like you see a lot of that. And I wanted to know why you never went in that direction.
Well, I mean, like, I don't know. I'm classic. I make my life hard. So I I know that doing that would be easy views, so like that's the first part of it. But also I know that everything follows. Like if people just clean up their life, and I know that if people are doing the things they're supposed to be doing, they're going to attract the best love possible. So there's no need to know what, the bozo from down the street is thinking, or like the guy that you were just with is thinking. It's like, it just doesn't matter. And so, I think that's really why I just have never really focused on it. Because, again, to me, the bigger picture is like way more important, focusing on, kind of like manifesting your own reality, really, which I think we all can do. But, when you're in that energy, then you're just going to attract someone who does the same thing.
Well, I'm happy to hear that, because I think that's why so many people love you, is because that you didn't go down that road, because I think it can be kind of addicting, right? Because it's always like, why do I want to be looking about the past person that didn't work out all the time? And what are they thinking? Like, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if that's going to keep me in my present or move me into my future, which tarot itself does great, right? You can look at the past and how it's brought you to this moment and then where you're going, right? It's like, I feel like there's a lot of tarot channels kind of just like, let's just stay in the past. Like, let's just keep staying there. And what are they thinking? And maybe this week there'll be a reconciliation or da, 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 da. And I'm just kind of like, man, how addicting is that? And I'm reading comments going, I don't even like this, but I like it because it's addicting. I'm like, wow, I saw some of those comments recently and I was like, holy cow. I was like, that is a different place. We've never been here in this YouTube spiritual space before, where people are like, well, I know it's not good, but it's addicting and I like it. It's like, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of see it both ways. I think for some, like I've heard from some people where they say that like it was addicting, their ex didn't come back, but at the same time, it kind of did keep them going in a sense. It kind of, made them maybe just keep, it kind of gave them a, I don't know, like a comfort blanket for a period of time. And I guess, that's what I always say. It's like, if you're going to watch it, commit, don't be watching like 100 videos at once. Try to limit it, I think, is probably the best thing you can do. I've heard from so many people that I've waited for like years and years and years. I mean, I remember when I did tarot readings, when I would do personal readings, like I would have people that came to me and they'd be like, this was like before tarot was as big as it was. And they'd be like, I've been waiting for this person for 40 years. I'm like, 40 freaking years? That is a lifetime. 40 years. We used to only live to 40.
I know.
That's it. So that's why I don't encourage people to wait. Like again, like I said, I truly believe we have more than enough in our life to fill like 100 lifetimes at least. So if you think about people, there's probably at least 100 people that'll take you out on at least one date. Never mind,
Yeah.
probably like a lot more than that, right?
Well, it's like, and I think you say this well in your readings too, right? Like I love how you tell people to take things on. And you
Hmm.
even bring up retrogrades. I'm the same way. I
Yeah,
tell people like go live your life. Don't let a retrograde
yeah,
stop you. Like I feel like it's like we'll learn through it. If it goes good, great. If it goes
yeah.
bad, if it's going to turn us to the right direction, either way, I'd rather be in it than not.
Yeah, and I think it's like one of those things where I think we've gotten to this place where people are afraid. I don't know if it's school or whatever, and maybe that's why, because I was like a failure in school, and that's why I'm like this. But it's like I'd rather be failing all the time. Like I'd rather be making mistakes, because it's like if I'm not, then I notice that I'm not moving forward. I'm not doing anything. So I think we should be willing to make these mistakes during retrogrades, or dating people, for example, as well. People are always like, I don't want to get hurt again. I'm like, well, yeah, but you like learn a lot when you get hurt in those situations. And yeah, maybe you gave like a part of your heart to a person, if you want to be dramatic or whatever. But at the same time, it's like I think, experiences should be fun, even if they hurt. It's like there's so much we can learn from a person. Like, why wouldn't you want to have a bunch of those experiences if you can?
Yeah, and I feel like it's almost like those other tarot channels that do get in those places still serve a purpose to where finally
Yeah,
maybe people get over it. Like, okay, you know what? This has been like 2 years and I've watched it
right.
every week and they never did come back and and I'm finally over it. And thank you
Yeah,
for serving that purpose of helping me get over it. Maybe that was what was aligned and fated for, and that was a way for them to go through it. Or they could have been doing it alone by stalking their page, which probably would have been more unhealthy. So
yeah,
I don't know. I feel like there's a point for everything in life, but I love that you do come from a place of like
yeah.
really encouraging people and using these gifts to have them. It's now. The life is now, and finding ways to, like you said, clean up their life, and that you do believe that the greatest things come. I'm in that same boat,
Yeah.
and that's why I think you do such great work. And I just
Oh,
really
thank you.
wanted to know that because it could have been really easy to go down those roads. And that's something that you never did. And if anything, you expanded even more so without having to do any of that.
Yeah, it's like it's crazy, because I think I mean, not bragging, but I think I'm the only one that does only tarot that has grown to these numbers. So pretty much everyone who's bigger, on the over what, like 500,000 subs or whatever, probably all do love. I don't think any big ones don't do love, right?
Right. No,
So
you're 100% correct.
yeah, I mean, I think it's worth it. That's what I try to tell people, is like I think it's worth it to stick up for what you believe in. And again, like I said, I feel like I agree with you. I totally think those channels serve a purpose. And again, maybe it accelerates it. Maybe, like you said, it's like 2 years instead of 40 by
Yeah,
them
because that
watching
would be
watching it for
horrible.
2 years.
That's a
Yeah, that would be
huge
terrible.
contribution to the collective.
Right.
All right, 2 years, not 40. Geez,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Way
wow.
better. Right. Exactly. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure it serves some sort of purpose.
No, and I think that's why I think it's an important topic because I feel like right now, you know, people are looking for a lot of answers, and really, it's not that any of us are the ones that have all the answers. We're
Right.
helping people find them within themselves, and that's the strongest place that you could be.
And especially speaking of Neptune and Aries, I mean, that's why like that's what I keep trying to tell people, like listen to yourself, not like some guru that could be starting to come up over the next few years too, right?
Yeah, I mean, like that's where I think if you look at politicians and how people can be over identified through them, and like
Mm,
then they do something wrong or they do something, and then it's like, oh my gosh, geez, like or sports, right? It's like people have turned like
yeah.
politicians or gurus into like following a sports. At least in sports, that there's a possibility they're going to lose, and when they lose, you can be like, oh man, my team didn't win this year. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
But like this is like, oh my gosh, the downfall of this person is the
yeah.
end
It's
of me or
crazy.
something. And it's like you never
Yeah,
want to be in a place like that ever. And I feel like that's
right.
where,
Yeah, 'cause that,
sports kind of at least have the boundaries of the rules of how the game's played. And at least you have an expectation like somebody's going to win or somebody's going to lose. And that's okay. But like, the boundliness and the boundary like listness of Pisces and Neptune, people can kind of take some of these figures and take some of these people and like lose it where there's no boundaries, and then there's no, you know, like, what do you mean he'll never lose or she'll never lose, or and like it's like, no, you got to remember reality too, you know. Or like you see that in the twin flame, you know, talks right now, right? Like people are talking always about twin flames and, you know, all those kind of things, and it's like sometimes those have no boundaries, to where it's like, okay, like now I'm sitting here, my twin's supposed to be a runner and I'm supposed to be the chaser, and then
yeah, right.
you never find anything, you know. And so some of the spiritual stuff, you know, applies into that as well. And so you bring a lot of grounding into it, and surprisingly enough, being a Pisces that you are, right? It's like such a unique way of how you know how to ground people.
I think it's a lot of Earth, but in my chart probably, or something. I don't know, or I don't know. Venus. I have Venus and Jupiter and Aries, so I don't know if that helps either. But something.
It helps, but I think that Pisces are very grounding, because if you have a way to take your imagination, your intuition to the boundless realms, but bring it back here, and are able to understand how to take things to where they can actually go, opposed to, you know, giving people things where you don't ever want somebody to feel stuck. Pisces have always found the things that made them feel stuck, or subconsciously, right? So it's like, oh, I don't want that to happen to anybody else, you know. That's the best part of a Pisces that's really doing the work, is like, I'm going to make sure that you keep with the flow and not get stuck. And I don't want you to be stuck.
Yeah, I was stuck for years. So I totally know what it's like. And yeah, that's like, I mean, that's the whole message. I mean, that's the whole point of this podcast as well, is just like trying to give people ideas of how to get unstuck, move forward, make their dent, you know, the whole 9 yards.
If I can help anybody, when I started my daily video was Mars retrograde in Virgo. Right. So everybody told me like, wow, why are you starting your daily video during a Mars retrograde? I'm like, because I'm ready to change my life.
Yeah.
And I've reflected deeply in that, and I'm going to go do it. And did the best things in my life, you know? And so some people always are like, why would you? Or I remember I bought cars in Mars retrograde, and nothing happened.
Nothing. Yeah.
You know, so it's like, I feel like if you get lost into some of these things, you know, it's more about the conscious understanding. That's really where all this work is. And some people take some things way too literal, like, well, I can't do this. And I think when you ever put in the I can't, it's like it's like a subconscious fear of actually doing it. It's an excuse of not to do something, you know, and a fear usually. And so it's easy to attach to things outside, right? Like, oh, retrogrades or 3 of swords. Probably shouldn't go out tonight.
Yeah, right.
Right? It's like, maybe the 3 of swords is saying that if you don't go out tonight, you'll be at home sitting alone, feeling isolated and sad, you know? Like,
yeah, exactly. I mean,
it could go in any direction, but I feel like you're right. Like the universe brought us here to do things with it, you know? So I'd rather go in and I'd rather go through the experience of being heartbroken and being like, well, at least I didn't just sit around and was heartbroken and probably just sitting around watching a movie I've seen before, or playing a video game all night, to where I'm like, oh man, eating donuts all night and then falling asleep and not feeling good when I wake up, you know?
Yeah, and I think sometimes when you make the decision as well to do that, like where you're going to say, you know, I'm going to keep dating no matter what, then you also become more powerful, because you're just like saying, I'm going to do it no matter what. So then you know, that kind of takes you up in a whole other level as well.
Yeah, like, and I feel like there's that spirit of just never giving up in life, right? It's like we have our moments where there's it's not even rough patches, just where it feels more like a maze, especially now. But if you get stuck and you don't find yourself out of the maze, then you'll never get out of the maze, and you'll like have so much doubt in yourself that you'll get stuck, and then you'll feel like you're never going to find your way out. But you know, there's ways out of the maze. You just have to keep going, and when you run into a dead end, be like, okay, that's not the way. At least I know I'm not going this route anymore. Let me see what the next routes are. And that's life. You know, it's not perfect.
Yep. Yeah.
And the perfectionism also is a bad thing that comes around a lot, you know, especially if we brought up the original part of this podcast with starting. Like, I knew it wasn't perfect to have a laptop to start this, but that's what I had. And you know what? It helped people. And I found the best ways I could to make it look like it was. And people cared about the message and kept sharing it.
Right.
I mean, you know, and so I just feel like, you know, too many people like want to make it perfect. I'm like, perfectionism is something that happens over the span of your whole life. Like you constantly, even at, you know, the level you're at or I'm at, man, I'm still always like, it's not good enough, you know, and that's kind of a driving force to keep going better. So I look at perfectionism as a good thing when it's like yeah, I'm going to use my whole life to make things better. I look at it more as like, how can I keep making it better, opposed to just like, I'm content the way it is and just staying at this level. It's like, no, I always want to take it up a notch and make things better. So it's like, you know, like that's what's the driving force behind the individual part of doing the work, if that makes sense, is like, how can I make this better for people? How can I make this greater for myself? Because I enjoy like, ooh, there is a new thing I could do. There is a software program that could, you know, change the cameras now when that came out. There is a new, like, those are the exciting parts. I get so excited over a stupid new chord available that changes the game. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's like wow, like that's so exciting, you know? And I feel like if people can find that place in their life, they'll realize that every little part of it is so exciting about life and to do work that you love.
Yeah, it's happiness. You know, it's like creating happiness. That's why, like you know, when I had COVID, you know, a while ago, and I came back, I wanted to do videos right away, and people are like, "Take a break." I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm not happy if I'm not, you know, if I'm not working. It's you know, I'm not creating videos. It's like it's what I do. You know."
Yeah, and I'm with you on that, because I feel like if that's what makes you feel good, right?
Yeah, it made me
Especially if
feel
you're
good.
sick, the best medicine in life is doing what makes you feel good.
Right.
It's not like it's overtaxing you. It's not like it's saying like, you know, I jet ski race, right? When I had COVID like 7 weeks ago, you know, it was like I knew I had a race coming up, but I also knew like, you know what? I'm not gonna go try and work out or try and go jet ski right now, but I can still do this work, or I can still talk about things, or I could do research in bed about some of these big transits coming up, you know?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna stop like doing the work, however it is, you know what I mean? Like what makes me feel good, you know, that's where it's at. And I think that's kind of the secret to like getting through these things now, is finding things that make us happy. And no matter how minute or how weird they are, I mean, you know, I think there's that whole collective, like subconscious fear of what other people might think. And I think that's the major shadow part of Aquarius with Saturn there, is to stop limiting yourself over kind of the illusionary, like kind of false, like, well, what will all these people think if I do this? Or da, 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 da. It's like nobody's sitting around and thinking about you all day while they're going to the bathroom, they're taking a shower, they're doing their laundry. You're not on their mind 24/7. You know, like I try to tell the people that, like, you know, we think about each other, but not that much, you know, like in the scheme of things. It's not like I'm running through and going, is Chris Reck doing this today? Is he doing that? How dare he? You know, nobody's doing that.
Yeah, and people are so occupied with like so many other things too, so they definitely aren't, you know, thinking about whatever you're doing.
Especially in social media, like the next story pops up, or the next reel, or the next TikTok, and you're like, it's like we're going through like hundreds of thousands of people a day. It's crazy.
It's crazy. Yeah, I said something the other day in a video. I was like, people need to stop being afraid to be cringy. I'm like, we're all freaking cringy. We've all done something cringy, so you might as well just do it, you know, keep doing it, right?
Yeah, it's kind of funny though, because I feel like the people that we are actually the most like relatable to are the more cringy people, and the people who are trying to be a certain way, almost like are just like, yeah, I don't want to watch that. Like it doesn't feel real to me anymore.
Yeah.
You know,
it is weird that you know, that is a good point. I like, I've noticed like sometimes, like back in the day, maybe there'd be some fake videos. Remember like the fake prank videos and stuff like that, and it still had like an element of reality to it. And now it's like I see these fake videos on like TikTok or whatever. I'm like, man, that is just, it's so blatantly obvious that, you know, things are staged or fake. You know?
Yeah, and that's where, you know, I feel like the realness of a cringy thing, right? Like if you want to wear Crocs and, you know, do something about that. I'm more relatable with like you just being your own way than somebody who's like scripting themselves, or, you know, feels almost like it's trying to be like, the reason why a lot of shows in Hollywood failed was it was always like, look at this show, and like, let's just kind of take it and just do little things different. And it was like, why didn't it become successful? It's like, because you tried to be that show instead of being your own way. And a lot of people got scared in Hollywood for the last decade to be like too different, right? But the shows that did well were the ones that always were different and went on their own course. So it's like, especially on YouTube, right? Like, it's like, you know, like they're the top channels they're very unique and different. Like the PewDiePie guy, I'm like, that guy is so in his own world that I don't even know what he's doing next. But if I ever look at a video of his, I'm like, what is he doing? Cool.
Yeah.
It's not like he's trying to be something. He's just like doing his own thing. That's why he's like one of the top channels.
Yeah, he just he just wants to create videos. That's what he wants to do.
Yeah. Or what was her name? Jenna Marbles. Like, you know,
Marbles. Yeah.
And you know what? It was just, she was just having a good time laughing and just being herself. And hey, you know, it's kind of funny how much triggering that could be though in today's world. But
yeah, right.
But really, it's like look at Britney Spears. How many people love her through all the crazy stuff she's had to go through, right? But they relate with her because she's being real about it, and she's extremely vulnerable. I mean, you know, if you look at her now, it's like, that's not the same Britney I remember at Wango Tango 2000 that I saw her. So, you know, I was 16, but, you know, I did see Britney Spears at the beginning of her career. Of course I would, you know, 15, 16-year-old. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm going to go, you know, all the girls are going, let's go. But, you know, like that's, and, you know, it's like, she's relatable because she's evolved and changed, and, you know, she brings out all of her stuff and what's going on. Right. Whereas like, you know, celebrities, you just kind of keep it all like, you know, like through the filtered lens.
Right.
Nobody, you know, like nobody, I don't know. Nobody really cares.
Nobody,
I hate to say it, but I mean, like nobody cares. Like,
I think people are caring less and less and less, you know, too.
Yeah. And well, and I think they resonate more with people who are doing their own thing and they relate with. And I know so many people who love your channel. It's insane.
Yeah. Same
like our last podcast we did when I did it with you was such a hit. So many people are just like, I love him so much. I watch all his videos, and all my like inner circle of my spiritual friends, like all watch you. Like I'll be like, it'll be just be random too. Like, you know, it'll be a couple weeks and then I'll just hear someone say like, yeah, like Minnow Pond, like that reading for me and just like totally like helped me through my life. But I'm like, yeah, I'm always so happy to hear that, you know?
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I really am. I don't get to hear it enough, I guess. So
well, I like letting you know. So, you know.
Yes, so thank you. But so I've taken up way too much of your time. So I'm gonna let you go. But before I let you go, you know, definitely let us know where people can find you. And do you have any closing words, anything you want to say?
Well, you never take up too much of my time. I feel like I said this week in my weekly intuitive on High Vibe TV, that's where to find me. I said that anything that feels timeless is where we want to be right now, where we lose ourselves, where we're not even thinking of the clock or the time, and we lose ourselves. That's really where I feel like the positive things are going. When we're stuck in the time things and the time constraints, it's stressful right now, and it almost kind of feels like it's controlling, or it's not. Like, so I feel like you didn't take too much of my time at all. If anything, it's great to go in the timeless realms. And I would say that's my last words. Like, I feel like
love it.
It's timeless energy, right? Like, even just think of your channel, like to look back at old videos when you were using playing cards, you know, like to me, that's timeless. It's like a picture, you know, when you look at a picture, you know, of a family member that's passed in this life or anything, it's timeless. Their energy is timeless. Like those videos are timeless that you did. And so I feel like if we could step into that more in our lives, we'll see so much more, you know, of the actual dream that we want to have in our lives. So
love it. Well, thank you for being here. Of course, really appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
Thanks.
Bye.
All right. Perfect.